God's walked in.
Rejoice together, for the time we are living in is the time for reclaiming our own. Brothers, listen to me.
Did you know that God's walking? Did you know God's walking?
You're not here by accident. You're here on purpose.
We need people who are selfless. I mean, they are willing to do whatever it takes to change the world.
Don't get it twisted, because a lot of people feel like, well, that was then and those were old people. No, they were not. They were you all.
Get in touch with your inner spirit and keep your feet on the ground.
Every generation is supposed to disrupt, is supposed to challenge.
Every generation has to be a part of the freedom struggle, because if not, we lose ground.
We have to realize that the civil rights movement is not over. It just looks a little bit different, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
In spite of what's going on in the world, I'm excited about your life.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Aisha Howard. This Black History Month, we celebrate today's pioneers, people on the front lines of change. We're talking about ordinary people doing extraordinary things to improve the quality of life for those in our community. Atlanta is a city with a rich sense of not just Black history, but American history, and it's weaved into our social, business, and political fabric. A journey made possible by the foot soldiers of the civil rights movement, who had the courage to say enough. We began with a salute to them and some iconic moments in time.
And I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
Birmingham was the eye of the storm, so that if we could get Birmingham to turn around, the rest of the country would move easily.
We thought we would be killed, and we were prepared to be killed. Dr. King said, you know, they don't call it Birmingham for nothing.
We will use the dogs if they start drawing knives again. We will use the hose if it becomes necessary.
Being hit with a water hose was a very painful experience. It knocked me down, and I described it as feeling like being hit with a whip.
I never thought that it could happen any place in America.
The movement had reached its zenith in the South, and we now wanted to go to the seat of government.
President Kennedy didn't like the idea of hundreds and thousands of people coming to Washington. And he said, Mr. Randolph, if you bring all these people to Washington, won't there be violence, and chaos, and disorder? And we would never get a civil rights bill through the Congress. Mr. Randolph responded and said, Mr. President, this will be an orderly, peaceful, nonviolent protest.
I have a dream today.
It's certainly the most significant speech that has occurred in America in our 250-year history. It stands with the Gettysburg Address, and it may even be more significant because it ignited an international dream.
Thank God Almighty, we are free.
52 years since the death of Dr. King and nearly 4 years after America's first Black president, we ask, who are the Black leaders of today and what are the main issues facing Black America?
Challenges of the past.
This is raw tyranny under the guise of maintaining law and order.
Teach us what we need for the future.
But it was for one reason, and that was because of the color of his skin. The church has become more secular, and I think the Black church in particular, as we have prospered, we have taken our eyes off of activism.
Pastor Lee Jenkins grew up believing Black churches held a leadership role during the civil rights movement. It was the church that created leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and others of the movement.
We need that same type of sacrifice today.
Jenkins has made that sacrifice. He left a successful career as an investment advisor to answer a higher calling, becoming lead pastor at Eagles Nest Church in Alpharetta.
I just wanted to make more of an impact, again, on families and on people.
And race relations.
I don't feel like we're in a very good place. It just looks a little bit different, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
A few years ago, Jenkins jumped into that work with a new idea called the conversation movement.
That I would experience being called a spick to my face by a little old white lady I'd never seen before.
It's a joint effort between his church, predominantly black, and Roswell community, predominantly white.
So what we have tried to do in these small groups is to personalize all of our experiences. And then that leads to racial unity and understanding.
Every generation has to be a part of the freedom struggle, because if not, we lose ground.
Losing ground is not an option for Dr. Bernice King. As CEO of the King Center, she continues to pursue her father's quest for equality. She believes one of today's biggest issues is the racial wealth gap.
If there's some kind of disparity or some deficiency that a person has, wealth can put them in a position where they can overcome it.
King says conquering the divide and other racial challenges of our time doesn't require just one prominent leader like her dad.
I think it's less about the actual person and more about the collective as we move forward.
Democracy.
And we're going to stop it right there. I think as we talk about more as opposed to the individual, it's more about the collective. I just want to stop right there with that. Minnie, I turn it over to you.
What's going on, family? We're back with part 2 of iconic leaders and moments in Black history. Before we get into it, I'm going to introduce our panel, including our guest for the day. Just tell me who you are, and if you would like to share any iconic leaders or moments in Black history, you can do that too. We'll start with Haneef right at the top.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Haneef Nelson. I'm a musician and educator. And, in my field of music, specifically in jazz, there are a lot of people who took leadership role in the Black community. And I love this conversation because it's a necessary conversation that we need to have. And I look forward to what comes out of it today.
We're going to skip D. Moss and go straight to our guest, Mr. Porter. How you doing?
Good, sister. How are you?
I'm good.
Let me just start off by saying that it's great to be here. It's a pleasure to be here. And so Black leadership is probably one of the most important things we should be looking for today. And I would just put out a couple of Black leaders. The first one I'd mention would probably be Marcus Messiah Garvey. And then I would talk about leaders like Stephen Biko, for those of you who are familiar with his philosophy. So I look forward to being part of this panel discussions. Thank you, Mr. Moss, for allowing me to be here.
You're more than welcome. Thank you for being here.
I love to hear the name Marcus Garvey. It just really does something to me. I'm a Garvey at heart. What's up, Rob? Introduce yourself, Rob.
Greetings, Robert Jones here. I'm looking forward to a pretty dynamic conversation on Black leadership. I think it's used in a negative connotation, and people who tend to be Black leaders are exalted by others, not necessarily the community. So I'm looking forward to kind of delving into that.
And D. Moss, would you like to say a few words?
Sure. My name is Daryl Moss. Friends, family, and community call me D. I'm looking forward to this conversation on a number of levels. I think we have to constantly remind ourselves of folks who have gotten us to where we are. We all stand on someone else's shoulders. There's somebody else, I don't care what manner of success you have, there's someone who had to plow down mountains and open doors to make sure that you're here. And I don't think we do enough in terms of just telling the stories and singing the songs and reciting tales of the folks who came before us, whether it's your aunt, your grandmother, or a total stranger. I think we're all connected. We're all part of this whole communal ecosystem, and we have to remind ourselves daily. The other part about Black leadership is I think it's a necessary conversation. I think it's a very important conversation for the Black community. And I just like to remind people, when it comes down to Black leadership, man, this isn't about your family members. This isn't about your neighborhood. This isn't about the school you grew up in. This isn't even about the city that you live in. Typically, in this area, when we talk about Black leadership, we talk about it as it pertains to Springfield, not realizing Springfield Springfield is just a raindrop in the middle of a thunderstorm. There's so much more to who we are and what we need to do. This should never be a localized conversation. This is an international conversation, because what we're dealing with here in terms of leadership, vision, action plan, methodology, all that stuff, these are the same issues they're dealing with on the other side of the country. They're dealing with in the Caribbean. They're dealing with in the UK. They're dealing with in Africa. This is not a localized conversation. So Brother Porter talked about Stephen Biko. For those who don't know, if you don't know about Stephen Biko, man, open a book. If you don't know about Frantz Fanon, open a book. There's just so many people that we can talk about, and today we're going to talk about them. But thank you, Minnie, for bringing this topic to the forefront, because it's somewhere we really need to be.
I love how Mr. Porter, you had mentioned Stephen Biko, because it's not something that someone that comes up commonly in these type of conversations. Can you tell us a little bit more about Mr. Biko and why you think he's an iconic Black leader?
So Stephen Biko, and thank you for putting me on the spot, but that's okay. So Stephen Biko, let me pull up a profile on him. That way we get it perfectly right. So Stephen Biko, he hails out of firstly South Africa.
Yep.
And he was a prolific activist. I also believe he may have been, if my memory serves me right, he was a lawyer, a qualified lawyer, if my memory serves me right. But this was a brother that understood that power is not conceded. Power is something that you must take, and that we cannot negotiate with our oppressor. And and this isn't a fight this isn't a brother that went around looking for a fight. This is a brother that demanded respect. He demanded that Africans, and we're all Africans, are respected. And so he was a prolific leader. He wasn't a nationalist, and I have a problem with nationalists, because whatever country we land in, we tend to support that country.
Yep.
And that's the same. You heard Daryl talk about Springfield. There's a serious issue in this city. If you're not from Springfield, people don't want to listen to you. So you can look at your African brother in the face, or your African sister in the face, and give him no respect because he's not from Springfield. Those are some of the things that come up time and time again that I hear here in the city of Springfield. So when I talk about people like Bantu Stephen Biko, what I'm talking about is a African, a true Garveyite African for Africans. So I don't want to spend too much time going into Stephen Biko. But his philosophy is a general philosophy of Africa, being African, being, looking after us as a set of people. Liberation, Black liberation, African liberation. So I can go on and on and on and on, but I've got a few other things I'd rather say that's a little bit more important than that.
Oh, please. Oh, sorry. What's up, Rob? Go ahead, Rob.
Gary mentioned something that was very important that kind of resonated with me. Power is not conceded, and you can't negotiate with your oppressors. And I see that, I'm just talking about in my generation, what I'm seeing is that the self-appointed or self-anointed Black leaders seem to be operating from a position of trying to negotiate with the oppressor. And that hasn't gotten us anywhere for centuries. So that's my comment to the group.
Thank you, Rob. We appreciate that. I know how long-winded you can be too, so thanks for keeping it nice.
I kept it short on purpose. Okay, Minnie.
Yeah. Anybody else would like to point out any iconic moments or leaders in Black history?
I'm I'm going to say William Monroe Trotter, one of the founders of the Niagara movement back in 1905. They talk about the NAACP being the oldest organization in America, but actually, a lot of the foundation for the NAACP was laid forth in the Niagara movement. Well, William Monroe Trotter, and I think it was 46 other brothers, just crossed the border over into Canada to organize. So there's William Monroe Trotter. I'm going to say Patrice Lumumba. If you don't know, look him up. Of course, there's Marcus Garvey, Kwame Nkrumah, former leader of Ghana, who believed that Africans can be free if only they united against their European colonizers. There's Muammar Gaddafi. I think Gaddafi was critical. When we talk about Gaddafi, Fidel Castro, an amazing figure in history. I'm going to throw Fidel Castro in there as well. And I'm going to tell you why. Fidel Castro, when we talk about all the freedom fighters, South Africa, a number of countries, Fidel Castro actually ensured that they received the military training, they received the medical training that they need, they received a lot of the political training that they need to overthrow their colonizers, provided the financial backing for a lot of them. And then we look at someone like, I just went blank, Gaddafi, who also poured, millions into the development of Black Africa and really pushed for one united Africa. One of the reasons why I believe the United States tried to, they didn't try, they killed them. He talked about a single currency coming out of Africa. He was clearly a Pan-Africanist. If you look at the chaos that arose in his country in Libya after his passing, you see what's going on and why he was so essential. There's just so many. Even Robert Mugabe, I argue with people about that. Some people, don't like the way he ruled his country. I think Zimbabwe. But when I look at the way he took Zimbabwe from the bottom of the barrel, made them one of the leading countries in the world at one point, they moved up almost top 20 economically. He did phenomenal work. Was he oppressive? Absolutely. But would I have taken his form of oppression over Donald Trump's? Yeah, absolutely. This Cheek Anta Diop. You have to look at Dr. Ben, George James. I mean, so when we talk about leadership, we typically don't go with the academics and the scholars and the authors. But I even look at From Superman to Man, the author. What's his name? That book turned my life around. Superman to Man. I think it's I got the book. Hold on. J.A. Rogers. So when I look at people who are pivotal in terms of helping to create an environmental mindset that gave people the motivation and inspiration to forge forward, I have to look at some of those folks because they were clearly inspirational, and I can't leave Malcolm X off my list at all. I read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and I tell you, completely changed my world around. So those are some of the names that I got to throw out there. We can talk about them later on in the show. Another thing I love about all of them, the vast majority of them were truly selfless. And I think when you talk about leadership, you have to be willing to put your community before yourself and your ego. It's a sacrifice.
So Darryl, let me just ride your wave for a second, brother.
I'm listening, sir.
The other thing about the leaders that you just mentioned, that they truly were Afrocentric. They were not. They did not bow to the Eurocentric ideology, and that is one of the reasons why. Clearly one of the reasons why they were also despised by the rest of Europe and the United Snakes of America. But that being said, you also mentioned some of our academics. Our academics are, they're critical, because they're the ones that bring the information that we haven't been given, that's been hidden from us. So when you talk about Dr. Ben, and there's Ivan Van Stan, there was Dr. Amos Wilson.
Yes.
Dr. Amos Wilson. Let me tell you one of his quotes. He said, "The Black community has run the longest, most successful boycott in history against itself." That is a deep quote, against itself. And and so you can extend that quote to our Black leadership. We've been really coming against ourselves. you know. And so one of the words that I hope we start talking about on a serious level is not the coronavirus, but the colonial virus, because that is the virus that's really killing us, the colonial virus. You know, we need to really free our minds from this colonialism and get back to who we are as Africans. We need to Africate ourselves, you know, and get back to truly who we are as a people. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because we need to know what our leaders' intent is. If our leaders' intent is just to incorporate us into a current system, that's not going to bring us anywhere. Our leaders need to be thinking about Africating us, uniting us, bringing us back to who we are, changing systems, not necessarily working within the system. We have the power to change systems. Our sisters alone, if our sisters started looking like you, sis, more natural, do you know how much money that we would have to change an entire educational system? So we've got a lot of work to do, but our leaders are the ones that I'm hoping are going to start to bring us there. So that's why leadership is critical. It's critical because, you know, we have Black people following the wrong people.
You know, there's something I want to also say when we talk about Black leaders. You know, a lot of the times we focus on a lot of these names that are well-known names throughout history, as we should. But I think, you know, when we talk about Black leadership and most effective Black leadership really needs to begin with the Black leader in your house. Is there one? Because as much as like I think about people like Shirley Chisholm, I'm by nature, I'm an educator and I'm a jazz musician. And I think about jazz musicians that participated in the civil rights, that wrote music that reflected certain things about the civil rights. People like Charles Mingus, people like Max Roach, people like Abby Lincoln, people like Nina Simone. But I also think about the fact that, you know, I had some strong Black men and strong Black women in my family that told me things about my culture that I never knew about, things that I would never learn in school. And they set examples for me that were very real because I saw them every single day. I saw day in and day out things that we're doing. And so what I don't want us to ignore when we talk about Black leadership and the influence of Black leadership on our lives and what we do is I don't want us, and I'm not saying anyone on the panel is for clarity's sake, I won't want us to ignore the fact that we also have to think about the leadership in our own homes, in our own neighborhoods, in our own communities. Because as much as we need leaders to rise up on, you know, on the biggest scales and biggest stages possible, if we don't have leaders on the stages we look at every day, what example do you have to follow that's actually relatable to you?
I can say something real quick. I agree with you, Haneef. That short clip that we played earlier, the piece that kind of appealed to me the most is when the sister, I think it was Eunice King, when she said, when we look back at history and you see them people being chased by dogs and whipped by fire hoses, we can't just look back on them as if they're just, you know, historical figures out of a book. We have to see ourselves in those people. You talk about, you know, leadership in the home. I always tell the story of my grandfather. Not only was he the son of a slave, he turned around and purchased. When I say son of a slave, he literally was. He turned around and purchased half of the plantation that his people toiled on. So when you talk about leadership, and you talk about people doing great things, it kind of gives you a little something when you know that's the type of family that you come from. So you walk around with a cocky little chip on your shoulder, like, I'm damn near untouchable because this is where I come from. So you're right. When you talk about leadership in the home, more important, I mean, just as important as leadership in the home, I think we all have to look in the mirror and see leadership in ourselves. Because I think part of our problem is we get to the point where whether it's our father or whether it's some dude we've never met before, we put all our buckets, we have a tendency to throw all our eggs in one bucket. We'll grab one magnificent personality and we ride and die with that person. And we don't vet, you know, which means we won't vet them appropriately. We won't second guess them. We won't even, you know, ask them about what their vision is over the long term. We jump into bed with leaders and we keep it moving. So I think we have to be able to look in the mirror. We have to be able to identify what a leader is. We have to look for the qualities in them that we actually see in ourselves as well.
Mr. Porter, you know, I would like for you to opine a little bit further on when you talk about black leadership, like what are some of the psychological profiles have you noticed in black leaders currently, and even maybe going back to the 1970s, and if there's a difference between the psychological profiles of those leaders back then to the leaders that we have today in our community?
So that, I'll be honest with you, brother. I didn't prepare for that question, but I can tell you just on face value, on face value, that when we look at the black leaders that we're all alluding to, they weren't into the concept of individualism, right? That wasn't their thing. They were into the idea of collectivism, right? Where they believed that, we moved as a group. They had a clear vision about a set of people and not about themselves, right? And that there's a clear difference in the leadership that I see today in, not just the city of Springfield, but everywhere. But I think it's important that we focus local, right? So when, it's hard to understand how we're in a time in the city of Springfield where we have the most black leadership ever in terms of representation in the city of Springfield, right? This is over the last 5, 6, 7 years. This has been, uncharted territory. It wasn't like that before. Now we have, I don't know, Daryl, you're better to tell me what the numbers are, but I'm almost certain that, am I correct in saying, brother, that the overwhelming or the majority of leaders in the city council right now are people of color? Is that
absolutely? We have 5 black city councilors, and we have 2 Latino city councilors.
Okay, awesome. So now when we look at that makeup, right? There has to be individualism going on to have so many leaders of color, but yet we're still not moving the bar, right? We're still not really changing a system. One of those systems, is the educational system, right? The educational system is set up. It's not set up to churn out leaders. The educational system is set up to train people to graduate to continue on with the status quo, right? So we're in a unique position to change curriculum, and I don't understand why we can't do it given the makeup. Now, a lot of people may say, well, how are we going to do that? Well, we just do it. It's very simple. We just do it. We have the leadership capacity to do it. We have the majority to do it. So if I'm going to repeat what I said earlier, if we have the colonial virus, right, and we are thinking constantly like them, right, and not like the way we should be thinking, then we're not going to achieve anything. So Daryl, I hope not Daryl, Bob, I hope that kind of answered your question. Collectivism versus individualism, that's a profile right there. That's a way of thinking, and I just want to throw out another fact. And I think it was in 1884. Daryl, you probably heard of the Berlin Conference.
Yes.
Okay. So so that is when they were warring against each other. Europe was at war against each other, right? But they came together under a common interest, and they carved up the continent of Africa. They carved it up. So England took some sections, France took some sections, Portugal took some, Spain took some, other European countries took some, and they literally deconstructed Africa to make it what it is today, right? And so today we're in a position where our leadership constantly are arguing amongst each other, and they can't come together for a common interest. So, what I would say is we need to take a page out of that book. We can have differences, right? And we should have differences. we're not monolithic, but we as leaders, we have to be able to come together and do something collectively for the people. And to my brother Haneef, who I agree with you 100%. And this is not to blow my own horn, brother, but I'm going to talk about me as a leader. Okay, I came to this country, back to this country in 2007. I just happened to turn on the TV and I saw a brother being beaten down brutally by a police officer. His name was Jeffrey Asher, right? If you don't know about him, you probably remember the brother that got beat down in California. I can't remember his name right now. Rodney King, right? Yeah. This beating was almost comparable. So the ancestors in me literally said, that's your assignment. And I did not stop until that police officer got convicted and got incarcerated, right? Right here in the city of Springfield. So when we decide to move, we can move. And with all due respect, I didn't have many people helping me in that mission. So when we decide to move as a group collectively, so I agree with you, brother, about the leadership in the house and the leadership in the community. A leader isn't just the leaders, we all need to be leaders. But those that occupy the position need to be held accountable.
But you said something interesting. You said those who occupy the position need to be held accountable. And I think we have to distinguish between, someone who occupies a position versus someone who's actually doing work. Because it's a lot of positions. Like when I used to work in certain positions and in corporate America, I used to hear about all these managers and stuff who would do things. And it gave me the thought that there's a big difference between a leader and a manager. Managers tend to micromanage everything, and they're not looking for what's best for the group overall. They're looking for what's best for them and their come up when they want to come up to the next level. Versus a leader who's looking at what's best for the group, even if that means someone in the group surpasses them. And when we talk about people that are in the position, there's a lot of people in leadership position that aren't leading, and they're not there to lead. They're there to occupy a spot. They're there to play a role for someone else, or they're there to try to grab power for themselves. We see that in our nation every day. Every single time we look at Congress and we hear about Congress doing this or Congress doing that, and we look at what's in the best interest of the people, 9 times out of 10, they do the exact opposite, because that's not what most of them are there for. They're there to serve the best interest of themselves and whoever has bought them and given money to their campaign. So when we talk about leadership, I think one of the other dynamics we have to get away from is thinking that occupying a certain position automatically makes you a leader, whether it's in the Black community, whether it's in the educational community, government, musical community, or whatever. I mean, I think leaders are more the people that rise up and do the work. Absolutely. And their influence is what people want to follow than someone who occupies a position and who uses the power of that position to make people follow.
So I certainly don't want to occupy all the space here, but I do want to, as a brother, right, just firstly agree with you, but also just challenge that theory a little bit. Yeah, absolutely, brother. There are people that are occupying the space that aren't leaders, right? We understand that. That dynamic is happening right here in the city of Springfield. But here's the issue. The issue is they're still leaders. And the reason why they're leaders is they're elected officials, right? That makes them a leader. So what happens is they get to speak on the people that elected them's behalf, right? And so when let me just be clear, when they're talking to these people down in Boston, DC, or whatever, these people truly believe that this is our leadership, right? And so this is why, if they're in that position, they're leaders, and this is why we have to hold them accountable. We must hold them accountable. We have to acknowledge that they're leaders. They're leaders, because when whether it's the governor comes to Springfield or the congressman comes to Springfield, they're not necessarily coming to talk to you and I, and neither are we getting the invite to go into that space, right? So this is why it's important that, I hope you see we're saying the same thing. I'm agreeing with you, but at the same time, I'm saying these people are leaders. We need to hold them accountable, or we need to get them out. We need to, get them out of that position and put somebody in. One of the sad things is, when there's a race, let's just talk about, I like to talk local. So let's talk about the 11th Hampden district where a lot of us live. When there's a race, there's not a lot of people out there vying for that position, right? And those that are vying for that position aren't really saying anything. They're certainly not saying anything that resonates to me as an African, right? So we need people to get out there and challenge these people so we can put true leaders in, real leaders in, who can then galvanize with the other leadership and make some real change.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't disagree with you. I definitely don't think we're saying anything different, and I definitely don't think that it's like you're trying to, be the opposition for the sake of the opposition. I just like to make my point a little clearer. The people that occupy some of these spots and aren't leading, of course, they should be held accountable, but we have to put them in the right perspective in terms of, if you're not doing what you're supposed to do, we're going to hold you accountable to the best of our ability. But I'm not looking at you to lead me in my district if you're not doing what you're supposed to do in the first place. I'm going to do my best to hold you accountable to the job you're supposed to do. But to look to you for leadership when you've been irresponsible, that's like me sitting there. That's like if I was an alcoholic, I'm looking to the other alcoholic next to me who's giving me the bottle for a way out. I mean, that's not going to work for me personally, at least. And I think when it comes to leadership, you said something else that's very critical about getting other people out there that are going to challenge. Now, we on this show have talked about this many times, and I think one of the biggest issues that when I think about this from this political leadership aspect is that there's a lot of people that don't know how or don't know if, or that may feel like they're not qualified enough or whatever. I mean, you can run the list of things. I think those of us that are in leadership positions in our communities, whatever capacity that may be, we have to do a good job of defining what leadership really is, what serving really is, and be that example for people to see so that we can encourage them to be that person, whether it's political, whether it's in the family, no matter where, because we've talked about this a lot. Like, Black leadership is in every facet of society. And if we're not showing people what it means to be that, how can we expect anyone else to be that and then be better than that?
Haneef, can I just chime in? I think we also, when we talk about leadership, it's like if you look around your house. If I need somebody to fix my car, I go to a mechanic for a specific reason. He's the best at what he does. If I need someone to cook me a specific meal, I go to a chef who can cook a specific meal. We have this thing with leaders. We just assume that they're all encompassing and they can do everything. If we vote someone into a specific seat or office, the first thing we should ask ourselves as individuals and as a community is, why are we voting? If I'm voting Rob Jones in as a city councilor, I need to be asking myself, why am I voting for Rob? What is it I need Rob to do while he's downtown? The other piece is, I need to have a really good understanding of what it is, what role he would serve in his capacity as a city councilor. What's the extent of his power? What can he do? We don't ask those questions. If someone goes to Boston, every year we vote, every other year we vote somebody to go up to Boston as a state rep or a state senator. But we very rarely educate our community on what the role and functions of those positions are. And I think we have to do a better job of that. I think when it comes to leadership, I'll never put my heart and soul behind any elected official, white, black, green, or brown. But when it comes to the black community, we have to do a better job of teaching ourselves and teaching our communities that position, that process, every aspect of it, so they know exactly what they're looking for. If I hire an incompetent attorney to represent me down at court, the onus is on me to figure out why am I hiring that lawyer? Would I hire a criminal lawyer to represent me for real estate? I mean, we have to think about that, and we don't. We think because people get certain positions, elected into certain elected spots, whatever the case may be, that they know exactly what they're doing, and 9 times out of 10 they don't. And I think Gary alluded to it. Some people run for resumes, some people run for egos, some people run because they need a job. We got white boys downtown that are in that position because they need a job, and there's nothing they can do outside of those political offices. They'd have to compete like everybody else. So I think we have to do a better job. So when it comes to leadership, leadership is the brother or sister who steps up, creates all types of educational forums to make the community aware of what it is that they're up against. Leadership is somebody who organizes and says, you know what? Why are we fighting to change an academic system that has never benefited us? And they put academic components in place to make sure that our kids are thoroughly educated. I think that's leadership. Leadership is when you step up because you see a void or you see something that needs to get done. You do it no matter the cost. We have people who get in front of the microphone, they speak for our community, they're self-proclaimed spokespersons. 9 out of 10 of them don't speak for me. And there are times when I hear them speaking, I don't even agree. I'm like, why are they up there talking? They're unfamiliar with what their people are going through. You know, we got that undercurrent in our community. They're so out of touch with them. They're out of touch with the working class folks. They're out of touch with lower middle class. Actually, we have very, very, very few middle class or lower middle class. We have working class and undercurrent. And they have no idea what these people are going through. How are we calling them leaders? If we're going to localize it, I know working downtown, I told people, I'm not your leader because this dude hired me. I'm here to do a job. Black people come in there dealing with tax title foreclosures. My job is to help them out of that fray. Somebody get arrested for the wrong reason. My job is to advocate for them. So people need to have an understanding of the roles. When we talk about Black leadership, we have to look at vision. What exactly is your vision? Do you understand that this shit is like a puzzle? And we have to have 500 pieces that we have to put together so that we can, accomplish our vision and make things happen. When I look at Muammar Gaddafi, when he stepped up for Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah, after Kwame Nkrumah was assassinated, he knew exactly what the vision was: a united Africa, a united currency, make sure resources go into specific places. He did it so well they had to assassinate him too. The question is, what exactly is your role? What is your function? You want to step up and you want me to follow you, you have to show me that you can take me where our community needs to go. Whether it's me or anybody else, I think the second piece is, and I say it every time, accountability is a mother, brother. If we're not holding people collectively accountable, now I mean based on their personality traits, I don't like the way this dude walks, I don't like the way he talks, I don't like the way he looks at me. That's all irrelevant if this dude is the best dude for the job. So when we talk about leadership, I think we have to get down to the functionality of leadership before we can determine what leadership is, what it isn't, who is, and who isn't.
So, Darryl, you hit on two very critical points that firstly, you mentioned the president of Ghana for about the third time.
I'm sorry, I just love the guy.
No, listen, that's my brother, man. I love that brother. Kwame Nkrumah, I always pronounce it wrong. But let me tell you what's interesting.
Yes.
When he became president of Ghana, every European head of state bowed to that man. They flew him everywhere. It was important that they got next to him because they saw power in motion, right? And so they flocked to him. They flew him in. They treated power met with power. It's important to understand that. Power met with power. If you have no power, these people don't care about you.
Yeah.
And they didn't care about him. They cared because he had power. They had to talk to him. And that you should, and understand that, again, when I say that, power does not concede itself, you need to take it. That's a classic example. And just one other leader right now, John Magufuli, yeah, he's the president of Tanzania, right?
Yep.
He's the only African country right now that said, we are not taking no vaccine. It's not coming into our country. He has told them to go drink the bush and the natural medicine. That's leadership. That's true. That's true leadership. And the other thing, you know, I just want to talk about what Darryl alluded to, the platform. You know, our brothers and sisters in Springfield, we need to wake up and wake up quick. You know, if we put a leader in and we don't understand their platform, then we just completely wasted our time. We don't need another leader just to occupy the seat. We need a leader that's got that is spouting a platform that's going to turn the city hall's platform upside down. That's the type of leader we need. And here's the thing to understand. Hopefully, if you're listening in Springfield, once we elect him, they can't get rid of him because we have the power. We vote. They have to deal with whoever he or she is. And so understand that. Don't be scared of brothers that are coming with a strong, radical platform. That's what we need. And sisters, sorry, a strong, radical platform. We need people coming with a platform that looks completely different than our leadership today. You know, and this is no shade on any leader today. Our leaders right now, you know, we need to really put a fire under them and let them know if you want this seat, then your platform better look like something that represents me, my mother, my father, my children, and their children. You know, and so I can go on a soapbox. So
Gary, I'm gonna add one more thing to your list. They better not be afraid to say the word black publicly.
I didn't hear you, brother.
I said the other thing I'm gonna add to your list. They cannot be afraid to say the word black publicly. That's it.
No, absolutely. Matter of fact, don't be afraid to say black, white, Caucasian, or African publicly.
Right.
Because, you know, I'm an African. And that's who I am. And you know, I'm sorry, I just got to say this. And we need to start going downtown looking like an African. Right. And I'm guilty, right, with what I'm wearing. But, you know, a brother said, actually Amos Wilson again, he said there's 5 signs where you can tell we're suffering from mental slavery. I probably won't remember them all. But he said 1 is, what name do you answer to? Number 2, what food do you eat? Number 3, who do you call God? Number 4, what uniform are you wearing? Right? I can't remember what the 5th one was. But
I think it has to do with language.
Yes. What language do you speak? So all those things are absolutely critical. You know, this idea of mental slavery, or as in where I work, the African Diaspora Mental Health Association, this post-traumatic slave syndrome thing is real. This colonial virus thing is real. And so, you know, we need to start looking for some leaders that look like Africans, that speak like Africans.
Look and behave. So, Gary, one of the things that you mentioned, go ahead, Minnie.
Thank you, Rob. So when you made that comment or that quote from Amos Wilson about basically, you know, Black people boycotting their own progress and their own success, I thought about, you know, a lot of the movements that were just completely destroyed with the help of, you know, Black people. Think about, you know, we know it's a matter of fact that Martin Luther King Jr., you know, his own people had a significant role in his assassination. There's rumors about the NOI and the involvement with the assassination of Malcolm X. There's even the laws back in the day where you could enslaved people could gain their freedom if they told on their brothers and sisters that were planning to escape.
Notorious manumission.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, and I think about the success of the Haitian Revolution, and a big part of that being successful is because they identified and dealt with, you know, co-conspirators prior to, you know, making moves and implementing plans and strategies. And how can we better identify who these people are that look like us? They may talk like us, they may come from the same places we do, but they are not for us. How can we better identify those people And when we're working with them, because there's always that person in the office that take their job too seriously, that'll tell on all types of stuff. How do we deal with these people when we come across these people from a mental health standpoint?
So sis, that's an interesting question. So let me tell you another thing, just a little thing about me, right? That you don't know. So I'm also a probation officer, right? And so the way I speak now is the way I speak at work, right? And so I recently underwent an investigation where I was obviously the target of the investigation. And I was the target of investigation because I sent out 3 emails in my office that dealt with internalized racial oppression, white fragility, and microaggressions. And I framed it in such a way was that you should find this interesting. If you have any questions, please reach out and ask me, right? So it's notable that 2 of the people that complained against me were people of color, right? And so they empowered these white people to come after me because of their own selfish needs, right? They could not see the idea of collective power. They saw the idea of let's side with them and let's kind of give them the ammunition they need against Gary. So long story short, 10-month investigation, they gave me a written warning, which I, just scoffed at and, couldn't care less about. But, to answer your question, how do you deal with them? You need to out these people. You need to out them. You need to let everybody know. And you don't need to do it behind their backs. You need to do it publicly. You need to, because, I can't stand anybody that is talking about people behind their backs. If you are telling the truth, you don't have to say it behind anybody's back. Let's have a discussion. Let's sit down and let's talk. Matter of fact, let's have a public debate. But, I think that's what we do. We publicly let people know, as many people know, that this person is working with the oppressor. And a failure to do so means that we're working with the oppressor. We're working with the oppressor. So, if I know that this brother or this sister is not about us, and I shut up and I say nothing, and I allow that brother or sister to remain in that seat, that position, then, I'm just as culpable, right? So when we see, and I say that there's some brothers that's been talking lately, and, these brothers, and I'm not going to name names, but these brothers have been catching hell because quite literally they're telling the truth. They're telling the truth. They may not all have all their facts correct, but they're telling the truth about what poor leadership looks like.
And I know what you're talking about. I want to try and stay away from personality politics as much as possible.
I'll stay away from that, brother.
I get where you're going, and I feel you. But I think I said in any show that I put on from now on, I want to make sure these are conversations that the folks involved know who the other parties are, and they need to be having direct communication. I think, as we talk about leadership, and then I think I'm gonna move back, and then I'm gonna address that. Emma Gennessee says, a while back ago, you talked about the power of persuasion. She said, what kind of power? Economic power, power of numbers, power of persuasion. When we talk about, Kwame Nkrumah, in terms of having that power and speaking to power, I think she wants you to expound in terms of what kind of power are you referring to, and how do we do that here in the States?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Darryl.
All right. You talked about Kwame Nkrumah and how all the European nations wanted to meet with him because it was power addressing power. And when he walked in the room, he brought power, and he was a powerful individual who brought power to the table. She said, what type of power are you referring to? Do you hear me?
Yeah. Do me a favor, Dad. Ask the sister. Sister, can you restate the question?
Emma, if you're listening, if you can do that. Then, I'm sorry. Then back to the other thing. I think communication is critical because we have a tendency to work in silos. There are a number of people who point fingers at each other, and it's not a Springfield thing. This is a nationwide thing in the Black community. When I look at us versus the Panthers, if only they had communicated effectively, them brothers could have got more work done. If you want to look at the city of Springfield, I know the work that I was doing. There are people who have no idea what I was doing. Rob knew, and people knew what we were working against behind the scenes. Minnie, when you ask that question about how do we find the ghost in our circles, how do we find the people who are working against us? I think communication is critical. I think sometimes we have to get past our own egos, no matter where we're at in this country. In terms of the Black community, we have to learn to conversate with people, whether you like them or not. We have to do a better job of that. Because of the silos, we have no idea who's compromising our position when it comes down to dealing with white America. We don't know. But I think we do need to watch people's actions, not what they say, but we have to watch what people do. We have to look at their body of work. Because if you have somebody who's putting in damn good work, but they're not necessarily a part of your tribe or your clique or your circle, you may still, if somebody in your circle don't like them, then you're automatically going to assess them the same. We have to look at people's body of work. And I think we have responsibility to do that no matter who it is, whether it's your best friend or your worst. We have to look at the body of work. We have to learn to assess people appropriately. We have to look at their relationships with the enemy, and we have to assess those relationships. And more importantly, we have to have conversations. If you suspect something, we have to start having honest conversations and dialogue with people.
So I gotta, Daryl, I'm going to respect your position, and I'm not going to. So, and I wasn't going to go personal, but I
wasn't going personal neither. I'm just speaking in general.
Yeah, no, and likewise. But I think it's important to to restate what I was saying.
Okay.
This is to the sister's question.
Right.
Once we identify, sis, that somebody is really working against our interests, we have to make it public. We just have to make it public, because if you don't make it public, you are culpable. And there has been, and there continues to be in the city of Springfield, because I'm going to keep it local, where people are doing things that they shouldn't be doing, and most of us can see it, most of us know, and Daryl, you hit on it, we talk about it in our silos, and that is not good enough. That talks to individualism. We have to collectively bring this information to our community and give our community the information so they can make a decision. And I'm definitely not going personal, but I do feel the need to say this. When my brother Daryl, right, got removed from his position, it took a nanosecond for another brother to step into it. That's problematic. That is absolute problematic. That again talks about individualism.
So, Gary, can I ask you a question? One of the things you mentioned earlier about holding people accountable, we're in a society where the Black community is told what to think, what to say, who your leaders are, who your leaders aren't. And I think it's important for the viewers, because a lot of viewers just may not know what that means, holding them accountable. And I'd like everybody in the panel to give their suggestions on what does that mean to hold somebody accountable.
Okay, all right. So again, not mentioning names, right? Just a bit of a case study, right? So during the last sheriff's race, right? The last sheriff's race, there were several people running. One of our leaders backed one of our leaders backed Tommy Ash. He's a white guy who I personally, Tommy Ash was in my training. I was doing a training on implicit and explicit bias. And that guy laughed the entire time, right? So I knew who he was. So when I saw one of our leaders endorse him for, quote unquote leader, endorse him for sheriff, I felt the need to hold that situation accountable. So I took out a press conference. I did a press conference, and I made it public that this leader is not the only leader in Springfield, and literally opposed his endorsement and explained why I opposed his endorsement. Now, that was not personal. That was not personal. That was me holding what he said, hold him to his accountability, but most importantly, letting the constituency know that what this brother said isn't necessary. That endorsement's not a good endorsement, right? So that's an example of holding people accountable. Another example of holding people accountable, I think Daryl said it, is that we need to go and speak to people directly. You know, that's the best thing we can do, because, you know, if we can squash our differences as a brother and a sister individually, right, then that's the best way to do it. We all know that. We're family, right? If I have a problem with my brother or sister, I want to talk to my brother and sister. I don't necessarily want to annihilate them. So the first stage is talk to your brother and sister in love, you know, but what I would say is that the community has to come first. So if they are doing something that's harmful to the community and you believe that what they're doing is harmful to the community, I personally take it personal enough to notify the community that what this person is doing or what that person is doing is not good for our community. And they can make their choice. So that's another example of holding people.
All right, so Emma was able to rephrase her question, so we're just gonna get to that real quick. Then I got a few questions of my own. She said I was referring to the various types of power as we move forward, considering who might be able to represent the needs of our community. What type of power should we be seeking from them to harness? What's the right combination when we consider the challenges and the current leaders they may be up against?
Now,
that's a good question.
Here's the thing. When you talk about Emma's question and you talk about the power they need to harness, we have to realize that power doesn't just come from necessarily a position. I took the best class I've ever taken in my entire higher education was a class not relative to my major. It was all about power and the dynamics of power. And a good example is, all right, let's say I start a brand new company, it grows really big, and I hire Minnie to be my IT specialist to put and everything depends on my IT infrastructure. Well, if I'm Minnie's boss, then the logical thing would be to say that I'm the one in control and I have the power. But I don't have Minnie's skill set. And she has the capability of either making my business succeed or making it implode. So there's a power dynamic that exists where I have authority in terms of being a manager and a leader and the leader of this company, but Minnie has power in this area. So when we talk about leaders harnessing power, leaders have to know, gets back to something that Dee was saying earlier. Leaders have to know what's actually going on with the people that they're supposed to be serving. Who's doing what? Who knows how to do what? And they have to know how to harness the people that are willing to support what they're doing. Because the reality is even once our elected officials, they wield a lot of influence and a lot of power in certain areas, but at the same time, they need us to vote for them in order to stay in those positions. So until we understand that the dynamic of power isn't just about the title you hold, but about also the things that you do, the things that you're capable of doing, what you bring to the table, the resources you're capable of garnering, the things that you're able to do, coalitions you're able to build, like that's also an element of power that leadership has to learn how to harness. And that's not something that's just in the hand of said man or said woman. That's something that's in the hand of said community. Now, as a leader themselves, their position is going to come with a certain amount of, for lack of better words, responsibilities, power. I don't even want to necessarily say power, responsibilities, duties, and a certain measure of power over certain areas. And we have to look at what, once again, going back to Dee's point, we have leaders in all these different places. So if we're trying to find a coalition for our entire community, we have to engage the leaders in every aspect that's most important of our community, whether it's the educational, whether, like Dee said, setting up education, whether it's culture, whether it's industry, medicine. There are leaders in all of these different areas, and there may be one person that may speak to the needs of everyone, but they're not speaking to, even if we look at the presidency of this country, the president speaks for the nation, but he's got people, he got people that work for him that do specific things. He doesn't. So there's a really interesting dynamic when we talk about power that I think is very misunderstood here.
Can I just add something? I think the other piece is, I think for the last 45 minutes, we've been talking about personalities as opposed to systems or process. And I think, Haneef, if I feel you, I think that's where you're going. And Gary, let me move back a little bit. I wasn't opposing what you were saying. I was just kind of adding on to it. You think? I think public accountability, once we know definitively that somebody is working against our interests, once we know definitively, then yeah, we got to out them and expose them, because they'll go from town to town. And I just want to throw that out there. But I think go ahead.
Well, just real quick, brother. I just wanted to get a stab at that question. So I think,
that's what I was going to do. I want to do that as well. Let me just get this out. I'm going to answer my question. Yeah, I just want to just throw a quick point out. When it comes down to power and what we need to do, I think we have to stop putting all of our eggs in that basket called personality. Right now, what we're talking about is personality, what people do right and what they do wrong. We're talking personality. I think leadership means getting to the point where we understand that we have to put a system in place. We have to be real systemic about what we do. Control of our own media so that we can control our narrative without other people telling us who we are, what we are, where we are. We have to, make sure that we stay in contact with all facets and all stratas of the Black community, because that's mobilization. If we have direct contact with the community, we can organize and mobilize community. We need to have a business model. Every other community, they're not sending spokespersons. They have a business model in place to support every movement within their community. So that's the money. The other piece to be academic, putting academic components everywhere. Stop relying on a school system and create an academic system for our own families. That's reshaping our future. That's making sure that our kids get in the reprogram that they need. The arts, and talking about reshaping the tone and the content of our culture. I think that's critical. The other piece is reinvesting in spirituality, because that's all about family togetherness and a value system. If we're not looking at putting all those pieces together and putting a system together that outlives the personalities that we put up for and against each other, then we're not doing due diligence. And I think when you talk about power, when you have all those mechanisms in place, then you have a system. And you're not relying on a personality to make the right or wrong decision, because it's the system that dictates what's going to take place. And I'm done.
So, and I'm just going to just because I think that word power is really important, right? So I think, the best way for me to describe that is, for me, power is the act of being fearless. That for me is power. For too long, we've been operating out of fear, which renders us powerless, right? That renders us powerless. So when I see somebody that's fearless, I'm attracted to that personality. And so all I need to come with that is for that person to be honest, strategy, have honest transparency, and then have a platform that talks to our people. And I'm on board with that, I think, I can't remember who said it, but, in terms of white people, the first rule of psychological warfare is to condition the mind. And that is what's happened with us for so long. Our minds have been conditioned, and we need to uncondition it. And so if there's a fearless brother or sister out there, and for me, fearless is just willing to tell the truth at all times, no matter what the consequence is. And if they've got a platform, I'm running behind them. I'm supporting them 120%. with deed, money, and any other way I can support them.
What if that person has a platform but they don't have a system behind them?
Then I'll help them with the system. You know,
Okay.
so one of my things, one of my strengths, I'm a strategist, right?
Yep.
So I'll help them with the system, and you know, money buys systems, by the way, right? So you know, if we can support somebody with money, if we can put money behind them, we can buy a system. You know, and so I said that is kind of vague, but if you understand what I'm saying,
I understand. But and I'm not really, I'm throwing it out to everybody. Even still, it's like when we look at getting behind someone with a platform, that's someone who's running for office. What about the people who have no interest in running, you know, for public office, but they're still, you know, they want to maintain leadership positions in the Black community? No platform needed. Do we allow anyone just to come along, anyone who has a Facebook account, a Twitter account, or access to 90.7 or whatever, 98 point whatever in any other part of the country, just because they have a voice, does that make them a leader?
Heck
you know,
no.
the other piece is if we put all our money behind somebody, I'm just throwing this out, just hypotheticals, just so we can think this process out. If we all get behind someone and there's no system in place, what happens after we grow old and we don't have the time, the capacity, nor the energy to continue that work, and there's no system in place? I think I agree with you 1,000%. You got to be fearless. And if you ain't fearless, you better have somebody in your circle who got that I don't give 0 F's about what's going on. Let's go to war. You got to have people who are fearless. Everything you say, I agree with 100%. I just want to add, I think the systemic part about what we need to do is so critical. When I look at the work of Marcus Garvey and what he was doing with the Black Star Lines, almost got to the point where he was able to institutionalize what he was doing before people turned on him. To Minnie's point, when we talk about the people who infiltrate and destroy things and find reasons to turn people in. I look at WEB and him and his folks talking about the Talented 10th. No system behind them. If I move up to Noble Drew Ali, no system behind them. If I look at, we could work our way all the way up. And we had dynamic personalities, but we didn't have a system that would outlast those personalities. So I think we talk about really gaining power. It means we have this business sector in place. It's stable, it's growing, it's booming, and they're financing all of our, they're financing our movement. We can't be powerful when we have to continue to go to white people, when we have to go to white America or white Europeans or white whoever and beg them for dollars and dimes so that we can move forward. We just can't continue to do that. When we're sending our kids to be educated, and it kills me every time I send my kids to school and turn on their laptop, they're being educated by the freaking grandchildren of the slave masters and the folks who put the black codes in place. These are their grandkids and their great nieces and nephews, and we're expecting change. So we're sending our kids to be actively programmed the same way we were, but we don't have an academic system in place. Jews do, the Asians do, we don't. The arts, our arts revolve around money and trivial ass subject matter. Nothing spiritual about it. And then we wonder what we need to do. Real power is we take all those components and we put them together. Attitudes, egos go to the side, and we work on the system and focus on the system. I don't have to like the guy next to me. When I work in a factory and they got this system in place, the guy next to me, I may hate him, but we're doing our job because there's a system in place. My job is to make the buttons. His job is to make put the thread around the jacket, whatever the case may be. We have to have a systemic approach to this. Otherwise, we're going to continue to have these conversations. We're going to continue to have these same dysfunctional dynamics within the black community. A system is where it needs to go. I'm riding with Gaddafi. The system they tried to put in place, I think that was critical. Charles Stokes just chimed in. Let's see. What's up, Brother Stokes? We should be developing these systems and methods in place now. What is holding us back from making this happen?
Oh, can I say something about that one?
Stokes, we're gonna give you some answers, brother. Good question.
All right. First off, before I answer that question, I want to say something to what you just said.
Yep.
Racism has worked so well because it's systemic.
Absolutely.
Period. Oppression against black people in this country has worked so well because it's systemic. The continual re-education away from the truth has worked because it's systemic. So if we've learned nothing, then it should be that things that are systemic that outlast the livelihood, that outlast the lives of all of us on this panel are the things that last and tend to work. As far as Charles's question, we should be developing what's holding us back from making this happen? Personality, to be honest with you. Because there are some people that are more concerned about being the focus of a movement, being the spokesperson, being the one getting the limelight, being the one having the say, than, as for the analogy you just used, than being the person on the assembly line doing their part in this system to make this product that we're looking for work. So personality is the biggest thing. And second to that is, and I'm gonna say it like this, some of these pseudo intellectuals out here that think they know and they don't. They say all the nice words, they have all the attitude, all the swagger that they want to have. But when you boil down what they're saying a whole bunch of nothing just to be able to say something. And we have to be real about like who we're allowing, once again, who we're allowing to speak for us, who we're allowing to set agendas for us, who we're allowing to be a part of these meetings to plan. If you're not someone, I could say this for a fact. I know that Minnie has a background in process management, process development, and troubleshooting processes. Minnie and I have had conversations because we have a similar background in that area that I couldn't have with other folks who know nothing about this industry. So if I'm looking for someone, if I'm looking for someone in my circle to help me develop a process that's going to work, I'm going to go to the one that actually knows what it is to do it. I'm not going to go to the one that wants to talk about it and knows nothing. Our ability to reach out and look at within our community and look amongst ourselves to see who knows how to do what. And I'll say this and leave it alone. I've used this quote many times on the show, to quote my favorite Russell of all time, The Rock, to know your role, then shut your mouth and do it.
So I just wanted to go back to a comment that our guest panelists had brought up about how there was in a nanosecond, I think he said, there was another black man there to fill his place. Now, there was a lot of dissension about that in the community when it happened. There were some people saying, like, listen, it's better another black man than some other man. And then there's people saying, sell out, so on and so forth. So why was that problematic for you?
Sure. So, and thanks for circling back, sis. So, and let me be very clear. I am not saying the brother's a sellout, right? What I'm saying is problematic. And what I'm also saying, it was predictable, right? So white people will continue to do what they predict they can do. That's the idea of power, right? They know if they do this, this is going to happen, right? And so, if we could just, and I'm also going to bring back the concept of individualism versus collectivism, okay? If they know that whatever they do, their system stands, then they're not going to change it. Right. They're just not going to change it. They don't have to change it. So, it's problematic. And if that continues, then their behavior will continue. Absolutely. White people's behavior will continue. Okay. Where their behavior will stop is when they cannot fill a position and when we boycott them. That's where their behavior stops. Absolutely. Okay. So here's an idea, right? When we look at just about every movement that we have done, meaning us, Africans have done, it starts off extremely well, whether you talk about the Watts riot, whether you talk about the civil rights movement, whether you talk about the Brixton riots in London, England, whether you talk about what was going over in South Africa. When you look at us geopolitically, okay, what we do as a strategy works. It falls over when we stop doing it and we begin to negotiate because we didn't finish the job. We never finished the job. Okay, we start they begin to see power in motion. They then regroup and they literally say, give them what they want. Let's figure out how we can do this and maintain power, retain power. And then we, individualism, get paid, but the community loses every single time. So that's why I'm saying it's problematic, sis. Right. And so as a psychotherapist, right, as somebody that understands human psychology and our mind and how we think, that is the card they play every single time. Every single time they play the same card, and we fall for it every single time. So to my brother that took the position, he's my brother. I love him.
Right.
Bottom line, I'm just simply saying it was problematic. And I guarantee you, when the mayor went home, he was rolling in his bed, laughing his head off.
Absolutely.
Boycott City Hall.
Can I chime in on that? Gary, that was so, everything you said was so spot on. People need to understand what they pulled was it was a deflection. It got to the point where our community became so divided. I went on the radio to talk about how dope LeVar is, so that people wouldn't try and pit me against LeVar. That's my brother. I'm like, Gary, I love him. He took the position. But what took place was he didn't get a seat at the table. He came in as an aide. He didn't come in as a director of constituent services. If you really talking about equity, you would have made sure there was another black man sitting around that table, able to make viable decisions that can help move this larger agenda forward. They didn't do that. They pitted us against us, and it took all that old big Facebook dispute that people were having. It had us fighting each other, and it took our focus off this dude down here with his continued racist agenda. So we got to keep that in mind. It's not always us versus us. Everything Gary just said, I just had to back in on it. Spot on. I'm done.
He had said that we should boycott. How would we go about boycotting City Hall or the mayor's office?
So sister, do you remember the apartheid?
Yep.
Okay. Money is what stopped that system of apartheid. Money and power. And power for them is money. That's what that means for them. That's power. So when black people, okay, stop buying things like Coke, right? I don't know if you remember that. Black people, I'm not talking about cocaine, I'm talking about Coke the drink, right? when we stop buying Coke, right? Because the manufacturers of Coke had huge investments in South Africa. I think for a short time they divested. But when we came together as a group of people and started to pool our money, okay, the system fell. And then they cut a deal with Mandela, right? Then they cut a deal with Mandela. But the issue is, how do we boycott City Hall? Well, we boycott City Hall. We go down and we boycott City Hall. It's that simple. You know, if everybody, let me just throw it out. Let me give you a strategy. If every citizen in the city of Springfield decided to call out sick tomorrow, everybody, every last one of us, black, when I say black, I mean Latino, right? Every last one of us called out sick from our prospective employers and went downtown to City Hall, that is a boycott of City Hall. Something will happen. Something will happen. Well, that is the type of movement that we're talking about. We're not, you can't put 50 people downtown. You got to bring the whole city.
Shut it down.
Yeah, on a larger scale. Go ahead.
I just want to chime in on that. I think the other way of doing it is blacking out. Here's the deal. Every 2 to 4 years, we parade all types of people through our community trying to convince our folks to vote for these people. No platform, no love for the black community, but we parade them. every birthday party, every anniversary, I don't know, if they bring a guest speaker in town, they drag this dude, not just him, whether it's Richard Neal, whether it's Elizabeth Warren, whether it's Ed Markey, whether it's, Michael Fenton, it doesn't matter. We're always dragging people in front of our people and saying, my name is Daryl Moss, and I endorse him, so I need you to do the same thing. Boycotting also means not allowing these people to come into our neighborhoods.
Absolutely.
Not attend a single event, a single function. If I look at it from locally, Dominic's strongest base for the last 12 years has been the Black community. How many people knew that? His strongest base has been the Black community. Imagine blacking him out. Richie Neal, he's our congressman. He's the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee. Do you guys realize that is the most powerful committee in the House? Everybody understands that, right? But tell me, what resources has he brought back to the Black community? Our entire business district has disappeared when you come up State Street. And that's one of the things Stokes and I talked about 2 weeks ago on Andrew Keaton's show. Our business community has all but disappeared. We have micro businesses, but the brick and mortar businesses are all gone. Where's the federal dollars to support those businesses? So imagine every year Stone Soul, Indie Soul, the Caribbean Carnival, everywhere. And it's like events like this across the country. We're constantly parading white people through our events. And we're saying vote for them. We got Negroes who have never walked through our community, never stepped foot into a youth program, and we still parade them to our communities. Imagine if we started blacking these people out. Better yet, we're going to white them out. They're no longer allowed.
Persona non grata, brother.
There it is. I mean, so there are so many different ways. If you look at all these major businesses that support these politicians that don't support our community. What if we took our dollars and we did what they did in Montgomery and boycott their businesses? What if we boycotted, say, Walmart, Mass Live? And I still say everybody should boycott Mass Live because they've never, ever put a positive article in the paper about Black people. So there are entities that support the established system that we can boycott. So when you talk about power, the amount of money that we spend locally, statewide, nationally, and globally, we can shut stuff down in a major, major way. So we talk about political maneuvering, putting systems in place, and dictating who's going to speak for us and lead us. We can do that. But Gary said something that a couple of months ago at a meeting. He said, until we wipe the colonizer from our mentality, from our heads, we're still colonized. My last name is Moss. It's a slave tag, and I still shout it out proudly. So there are a number of things we need to do to get to that place and space where we can start telling you, no, you're not welcome in our house. They don't welcome us in theirs, but we welcome everybody into our homes.
That is very effective, and I don't think most of us realize how effective it is. I always say on this show, anywhere you can find me saying we fund and fuel our own oppression. Imagine us, we comprise the labor force, even never mind a local scale, but on a national scale. If everybody just didn't go to work, ain't spend no money, ain't go outside, we'll bring the country to its knees, and it's a matter of days. You know what I mean? Because we fund and fuel our own oppression. But the amount of organization it would take makes me nervous, makes me anxious, because we haven't, but not my generation for sure, we haven't been able to effectively and efficiently organize in such a way that it doesn't profit our oppressor too. Million Man March was amazing, but they made so much money off us. But absolutely, we have the power, and as soon as we decide to stand up, we just completely level the playing field. We bring the opposition down to its knees, because like I said, we fund and fuel our own oppression. So just coming together and deciding where we put our power and where we put our energy, that's really all we need to do.
Mm-hmm. Good question. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Haneef. Then I want to hear you guys address Stokes' question. Go ahead, Haneef.
Well, that was one thing I want to say, but before I went to that, I want to circle back to something that you said, because this kind of addresses some of the things that have been going on in this conversation. And that's when you talked about assessing someone's body of work, looking at what they're doing, assessing the body of work. I think sometimes, like just like when you were saying about this leadership discussion, we don't want to make this about personality. We want to talk about systemic leadership and the things that, you know, build the machine so that it can outlast the personality. I think sometimes the reason why we have trouble assessing someone's body of work is because we don't want to admit when someone we don't like has done good work. You know, we would rather hold on to our personal issue with the person than look at what they've done that actually works, that actually helps the community and the cause that we say that we're so passionate about, and that's working. And we don't want to acknowledge certain people because of personality. And I think that that's part of the thing that also stifles us in some ways, is because there have been many, many people that have done. I can remember my first interaction with you was at Community Music School of Springfield, and where you introduced me to some poets. And then next thing you know, every week I'm driving up from Connecticut to Dunamis Cafe. And then from there, I'm meeting at this festival, I'm looking at this festival, I'm looking at all these things. And then I find out that like all these things I'm getting introduced to, like you started. So I'm not looking at this and saying, well, damn, man, like this brother is like doing all this stuff up here. Like he really actually cares about like the arts and specifically in our community. So there's a body of work of things that you've done. And whether it's been the most successful thing in the world, whether it hasn't, you still continue to do it. So when we look at people's body of work, it builds a level of credibility in terms of what they're doing and what they're capable of doing. That doesn't mean that we ignore things that may be suspect, but it doesn't mean that we automatically rule people out because of that in light of their body of work either. You know, and I think that's something that we need to talk about. But and then I'll leave the rest of that alone because I know you want to get to Stokes' question.
Well, hold on, brother. Something that you said is important, right? And we can't let that go. When we talk about people we don't like, right? That's something we have to deal with, right? Because that's when I start talking about the colonial virus. We have no reason not to like each other.
Right.
Our default, and I'm not talking directly to you, brother, because our default is love. We have to love each other. And, you know, that idea that we don't like each other, that is the colonial virus. And I'll let you get to Brother Stokes.
Can I just add one thing? When you talk about what do you do when people won't admit because they have an issue with someone else, then that person, you know, that person or persons, they're just as at fault as the person that they're referring to. I may not like you, but if you're doing great work, or you're gonna get credit. I may not like you, but every time you touch that horn, I'm gonna be the first one in the front row. I don't care if you don't like me. I'm going to listen. So I think if all five of us are talking about someone that we need to hold accountable, and three of us are saying, but they've done A, B, C, D, E, we got to give them credit for that. I think we also have a responsibility to hold each other accountable as we're critiquing other people that we're about to expose. You know, it just, the process has to be honest and it has to be objective. So I just wanted to add that piece. As far as Stokes, what do we do when others from our community bring those people into our community knowing that they've done nothing for us? After we said, you know what, that's it, we're going to black them out, they're on the list. And then Daryl still brings Richard Neal into a meeting with our folks. I think that's the conversation. I don't know if we can talk about it publicly.
Listen, I'll tell you right now, if we sit there and say this person should not be coming to this meeting, and someone brings that person in, that meeting needs to stop and that person needs to go. Both the person who brought them and the person that was on the list. Because at the end of the day, if that doesn't happen, what we're showing is that this whole effort was just all talk to begin with. And we're showing that we're not really serious about keeping people out that have no interest in us until it's time to get us to vote them back into a position of power. So that's what we have. And then at that, we don't even have to put them on blast because they put their own selves on blast by bringing them in, even though they knew that they were not welcome. So they also did us a favor. They done told us who they are. So they put themselves on blast. So, and both they and the person they brought, y'all got to go. You're not welcome at this meeting, period.
And that goes to Gary's point about you have to be fearless. Walk up to the mic it's over until they leave. I think we got to do that. Minnie says on the side, a lot of our leaders had beef, but it served a greater purpose, and they still got shit done. Let's look at it the other way. What if Marcus Garvey had actually worked with, not Marcus, what if Booker T. Washington had actually taken the time to sit down with W.E.B. and they worked out their differences? You know how much further we get along, we would be right now? Mm-hmm. What if W.E.B. had taken the time to work with Marcus instead of judging him based on the color of his skin and his accent and seeing the brilliance behind Marcus? You know, it wasn't until his old age when he moved to Ghana that he actually started figuring things out. So they had beef. Imagine if Martin and Malcolm had worked together instead of arguing over methodology. There's so much more that we could do if we only see, as Gary said, see ourselves as a community and not as a community of individuals. We really have to work together. I'm going to be quiet on that point. Go ahead, Minnie.
You're absolutely right. And one thing that I know we'll probably get into next week when we talk about feminism is the ego, and specifically the male ego and the lack of divine feminine energy as it pertains. Shut up, Rob. The lack of divine feminine energy when it as it pertains to Black leadership. So, and that speaks to the organizing effect that divine feminine energy brings with it, and that balancing effect too. So, and that goes back to Stokes' question too about why is this organizing and stuff not happening? It's not a balance of energy, because when you want to manifest something, when you want to bring something from the ethereal to the physical, you need to balance feminine and masculine energy. And that's a lot of what we're missing. So I just want to go down the line. We went way over time. Sorry to keep y'all so long, but we're going to go with closing remarks. We're going to wrap this up. And we're going to start with Rob. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, so, you know, one of the things that Dal talked about with all those beefs, if they could put those beefs aside, we could have been a lot longer down the road of progress. But you can't discount the fact that those two people had a body of work. Those two people, whoever they were beefing, had a body of work. All right. So I love what Mr. Porter said about publicizing, outing folks. And I also like the blackout. We talked about a lot of things today. I'm gonna have to go back and watch this this video again, because there was a lot of good points in there. Got a lot of good feedback from people. And I'm just saying, my closing remarks is look at the person's body of work. And if they're not for the community, like George Bush said, if you're not with me, you're against me. And we got to treat them as the enemy.
All right, we got next our guest panelist, Mr. Porter. Closing remarks.
Thanks, sis. And let me just tell you, I agree with you, sister. My belief system, there is no God without a goddess, and there is no goddess without a God, and I believe in balance. So I think we have the same belief system. Stephen Biko said, it is better to die for an idea that will live than to live for an idea that will die. I think that's a very important quote. We have to be willing to die for our beliefs, and we're not going to get there. It's that critical. It's that critical as a collective, not as an individual, but as a collective. It's that critical that we get on that page. And so, I'm going to end by saying, we should be more worried about the colonial virus than the coronavirus. That being said, Hotep.
Yeah, Hotep, I heard that. Go ahead, Haneef.
This is, I think we have to continue to shape our discussion of leadership away from personalities. And I think we have to really look at processes, systems, and things that need to be put in place so that all these things, to quote D, as he said many times on this show, so that this is not the same conversation that our great grandchildren are having 50, 60 years later from now. And I think if we don't start to do this now, then we're just going to continue in a cycle that's been going on for as long as this country has existed. And I also wanted to say, when it comes to certain things that we're not seeing and that we're looking for and that we need, there's a great quote that I like to use from Shirley Chisholm. And she said, if they won't give you a seat at the table, bring a chair. Sometimes you have to bring yourself to the place where you're not wanted or where people are trying to keep you out in order to make sure that you are that credible leader that you want to be for your community, for your home, for your household, for your organization, for your industry, whatever space of leadership that you occupy.
And Mr. Moss.
All right. Closing thoughts. Thank everybody for engaging in this conversation. I think these conversations are so damn necessary. Gary, thank you for joining us, sir. We got to bring you back a couple more times. I had fun today. I loved it. I just think we got work to do as a community as it pertains to leadership until we get to the point where we define what leadership really is, and what our expected outcome is at the end of the day. I don't think we're going to move forward. We have to branch away from personality politics and really focus on a systemic approach to the Black evolution. I think we really have to do that. The other thing is we have to understand that not everybody in the Black community, every brother ain't a brother. And since everybody's spitting quotes, Marcus Garvey said, I have no desire to take all Black people back to Africa. There are Blacks who are good, who are no good here, and there'll be no good there. If you have no confidence in yourself, you are twice defeated in the race of life. Everybody can't come with us. We have a lot of ghosts in the mix. Everybody watched Judas and the Messiah. There are so many Judases out there. If I opened up a book and started spitting names, folks would be surprised. We have a lot of Judases that have to go. Just have to go. With that being said, I'm done, Minnie.
Yeah, because when you, just to piggyback off what D. Marsha said, when you think about what a land would look like that, started with criminals, this is it. You know what I mean? They sent the worst of the worst over here. You know what I mean? Just to get them out their own hair. So thank you guys for tuning in. Next week's topic is feminism. And if it has a role in Black liberation, you're not gonna wanna miss that. So D-Moss dropped the Cash App. It's time to tithe, okay? Pay us, contribute to our time and our expertise and our plans to liberate the Black community, just like you do your pastor. It's very important. We appreciate it. And thanks, everybody. We'll see y'all next week.
God's walked in.
Rejoice!